what I've been calling this is the regime change upsell. This idea that the mainstream media and the neocons know that President Trump is totally against getting into these forever wars. And of course we know, and Kurt Mills tweeted this earlier, that a forever war isn't called a forever war when it starts little bit by little bit by little bit, and it ratchets up. And if you are a certain age, you remember how these things get started. Well, he's always said that he's against the nuclear program. Okay, got it. Take care of the strikes, nuclear program gets hit, their knockback years or whatever exactly it is. We're waiting to see the battle damage assessment from that, waiting to see the military declassify some of this information. But you can see the neocons. And I'll say something right now. It seems like the neocons are upset that U.S. soldiers didn't get killed in these Iranian strikes today, because I saw a neocon, and I've got all your tweets saved, and I saw them saying, oh, the U.S. has to declare war on Iran right now. The U.S. has to declare war on Iran right now. We need regime change, need regime change. They're actually they're acting like they're upset up there that U.S. soldiers didn't get killed or didn't get hurt or that U.S. jets weren't hurt. It's disgusting and it's sick. Guys, do we have Joshua up?
Testing.
Oh, Joshua, we got you. Great, perfect. So, Joshua, am I? You're the persuasion expert. Am I seeing this? Am I seeing things, or is this happening? Are they trying to upsell the President of the United States and all of us on regime change?
Oh, yes, they have been doing this, the neoconservative characters, neoliberal characters, for a very long time now. And you and I also collaborated on a little book called Bulletproof, the first and only investigation to the attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump. And we wrote about the intended escalation by the military-industrial complex over the Iranian plot hypothesis that Thomas Matthew Crooks, the Butler, Pennsylvania shooter, was in fact in league with the Iranian intelligence service. And we found that there was simply no evidence of that scenario. It's a little bit plausible, but we point out that the sustained military engagement and defense spending, which benefits the military-industrial complex, could very well be behind that narrative, for which we found no evidence for. A unspoken by most reason why the neoconservative crowd, who call themselves Christians in many cases, an unspoken reason why there's such almost like a desire for war in the reason has to do with bad theology. There is a type of eschatology which has to do with one's belief in an end times, let's say, called premillennial dispensationalism. That is a lot of syllables right there in that mouthful. But characters like Mike Pence, the former vice president, who is praising President Donald J. Trump. We have Mark Levin. We have other characters who are on the right. They're evangelical Christians who ascribe to this idea that, and Ted Cruz spoke about this on the interview with Tucker Carlson, that the modern state of Israel, founded in 1948, is somehow the fulfillment of Old Testament biblical prophecies that are about the Jews' return to their homeland following the Babylonian exile. I don't think that's the case, folks. I don't think that's the case. And so Senator Ted Cruz is giving his, let's say, religious motivation for intervening in the Middle East. And so the fact that the United States is not in a shooting war, is not declaring war on an adversary of the modern state of Israel, is in this set of beliefs, it's somehow going to set the rapture back a number of years, a number of decades. And Jesus ain't going to come back until there is a war in the Middle East and the United States gets wiped out, which, by the way, is a big part of this predictive framework of the rapture and the end times. As you know.
So wait, Joshua, let me run that through if I can. And folks know I'm Roman Catholic. I'm Polish. You pretty much come in one flavor in terms of that. So we don't have this eschatology at all. So what you're saying is this is a version of, and I don't want to get into the theology debate of it, but what you're saying is this is a different version of what Scott, our good friend Scott Adams, and peace be upon him, that can be a sort of different movie, same movie, different screens. So we're all watching the same movie, and yet other people who look at it, who believe in this, they view all of these as the fulfillment if I understand correctly, a series of prophecies that indicate the return of Christ. And so, while a lot of people look at this and they say, wait a minute, okay, we don't like nukes, right? We don't like, you don't like religious nut jobs like the theocrats in Iran getting nukes. We want to blow them up or, end the program by other means. Okay, that's number one. But we also don't like World War III, so we don't want that. And we certainly don't like the idea of the price of gas going up to $6 a gallon at the summertime. But what you're saying is there's even another group that looks at, and this, by the way, if you're someone who has these beliefs, there are people who don't, who are also Christians. So what you're saying is they might actually be rooting this on because of this worldview.
Yes, this worldview that I'm laying out, this eschatology of like end times prophecy, was popularized first amongst the baby boomer generation in the late 1970s and 80s by a character named Hal Lindsey. The #1 best-selling book of the 1980s was called The Late Great Planet Earth, and it was laying out everything I've just said. The 1948 refounding of the state of Israel is literally in the Bible. The modern Jewish state is literally God's chosen people. Israel is the clock, is something that Hal Lindsey said. And then tens of millions of Americans grew up, came of age, and then many of them became bureaucrats, politicians, and neocons with this information environment. And part of the set of prophecies is that the biblical lands of Gog and Magog are referring to modern day Russia and Iran. So when evangelical Christians who have this eschatology, this background, when they see these headlines about Russia saying this, Iran saying this, they go, that's literally in the Bible. World War III is going to happen. They're going to invade Israel. But wait a second, as Hal Lindsey, let's say John Hagee, T.D. Jakes, and others who put forward this idea. Wait a second, Iran and Russia are literally obviously in the Old Testament prophecy, in the book of Daniel and Ezekiel and so on and so forth, Isaiah, right? They would say, the United States of America isn't in here. So the United States of America must have been absolutely wiped out in a nuclear war. So the only way for Jesus to come back is for the United States to no longer exist. And it gets a little bit dark when you realize this, but yeah, this is what I heard as a child growing up in this particular sect of evangelical Christianity. And while they don't say this, they don't all say this openly, I don't believe we should be following neoconservative evangelicals who believe that decisions they're going to make will necessarily result in the destruction of the United States of America. Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Mike Pence, these are probably not the influencers that we should be taking our counsel from with regard to making peace, not war.
And Joshua, when we look at all this, that this is something where you can see, and I'm sure there's a variety of interests, right? I've talked about how I'm sure the Arab monarchies who are no fans of the Persians, they're looking at those oil fields across Iran along the Persian Gulf, and they're licking their chops, thinking that they can perhaps get access or gain control there. I've talked about how regime change schemes. I went on Tim Pool last week and broke down all of Operation Ajax and how that was a scheme between the CIA and originating with the MI6 to overthrow the duly elected prime minister of Iran, reinstall the Shah, and it completely blew up in our faces and led to the Iranian Revolution. So the thing with these regime change operations is they always seem good, but then everybody forgets that the enemy gets a vote, and they always seem to spiral out of control. I can't necessarily think of a single one that's actually gone well for the United States or for anyone in any of these regions. But Joshua, that's what it comes down to, because therefore, put it this way, war is a racket. And for those on the warmonger side, they seriously want, for a variety of reasons, as you've laid out, one of the bigger ones, they actually want to see the U.S. go to war. Isn't that right?
That's right. So we have both the religious and the economic arguments for war, when in reality, I don't believe that that's what the American people want. Every survey, every poll shows how despairingly unpopular regime change in Iran is amongst not just Trump voters, but Americans more broadly, and also throughout the world. There is simply not an appetite to do this once again.